Hello, you're watching the Green Network Summit, part of our year-round DSP Leaders coverage. I'm Guy Daniels, and today's discussion moves us beyond the Green Network to look more closely at reducing waste and the role of the circular economy. This is the idea that you can design out waste and pollution by reusing, remaking and recycling products. And it should also help to minimise carbon emissions and reduce manufacturing energy costs by extending product life cycles. But how does this impact telcos, and how can they contribute to and benefit from the circular economy? Well, to help answer these questions, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the programme today are Sawar Khan, who is Global Head of Sustainability for BT Business, Anita Durla, who is CEO of the NGMN Alliance, Diego Murillo, who is Group Head After Sales and Circular Supply Chain Services for Telefonica, and Rebecca Griffiths, who is VP Product Management and Strategy at Assurant. Hello everyone, it's really good to see you. Thanks so much for taking part in this discussion. Now, the idea of the circular economy continues to gain interest, and I've got some figures here that suggest that we generate 50 million metric tons of e-waste each year, and this is a figure that's rising, and that's just from one research firm. But can we first outline what the circular economy actually means? And Anita, let me come across to you to get your thoughts and insights on what exactly is the circular economy.
Yeah, I mean, many different definitions exist about what circular economy actually means. And regular value chains are typically described as linear, so that the goods are flowing from manufacturers to operators to end users. And at the end of their lifetime, they are either used up or they are going into waste and not really reused. And the difference to a circular economy is that there are feedback loops introduced, so that components or the entire product or infrastructure devices are being fed back to the value chain. And being reused or refurbished or remanufactured or recycled. Recycling, of course, is also an important part of that. And by this, we achieve something different to the linear value chain, what is called circular economy. The main objective, of course, is to reduce waste and to minimize the use of resources.
Great. Thanks very much, Anita. And as you say, it's this introduction of this feedback, and rather than just going in a linear use and just discard, we've actually got a process going on. That's fantastic. Rebecca, let's come across to you now for some insights into your expertise in this area.
Yeah, when we think about the circular economy, exactly as Anita shared, right? It's moving from a linear economy to a circular economy, and that means keeping as much in service the goods that we put into production as possible for as long as possible, while at the same time, at the very start, from a production and modularity perspective, we're operating in a more sustainable way as an industry, and then devices are designed in a more modular way. So with the forethought that they can stay in service longer because there's the option to repair them and keep them going, and not just saying, okay, we need to dispose of this one and move on, but really with that thought process from the very beginning, with that production and modularity thought, and then moving on into keeping the modularity of the device going through longevity, right? That you're able then to have measures in place that you can repair it and you can refurbish it and you can continue extending the life of that device for as long as possible, because that's one of the biggest impacts that we can have on reducing the carbon emissions that are out there. And so from that production to longevity, and then when we do finally get to end of life, is ensuring that there are measures in place to recycle in a responsible way so that we could cull anything for valuable materials, keeping those raw materials back in the ecosystem and moving through. So it's really a part that we all play. And there's a key part that the consumer plays. And I know we're going to get into that in a little bit, but because they have control of that device once it goes into service, then we need to ensure that there are methods that they have to continue using that device and bringing it back into the ecosystem to support that circularity that we want to put out there.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. And yes, as you say, we will come and look at the consumer side in more detail a little later. But as you say, devices do have a finite life cycle. We're trying to prolong that life cycle and then work out a more responsible way of disposing at the end. Let's move the conversation on a little here and bring it to telcos, because I'd like to ask if operators have been somewhat slow to take action on e-waste and the circular economy. Now, there's a ton of research everywhere about this, especially with another COP event coming up very soon. Analysis from BCG, for example, shows that waste and the circular economy is the worst performer of its telco sustainability metrics by far. And that's just one research firm. Are there any industry waste reduction targets rather than regional ones such as the EU's regional targets? And if so, have telcos signed up and are they engaging with them? So if I can come across to you, you're one of the telcos on our panel. Is it fair to say that telcos may have been slow? Or
I would actually argue that telcos are part of a more complex ecosystem. And within that ecosystem, it's not simply telcos who are responsible for driving the circular economy. If you start at the beginning of the supply chain, then we also work and heavily rely on the OEMs of the device in the market with regards to either smartphones or networking infrastructure. We rely on them to prime and enable the market so that the telcos are able to procure products that are circular, such as modular in design, as touched on earlier, potentially longer in lifetimes, and potentially even refurbed options for the longer term. But what I see is that market is yet very nascent. If I think about it from a B2B customer lens, being in the business arm of BT, then both telcos and OEMs are dependent on end customers actually wanting circular products as well. So whilst we see the consumer market much further ahead compared to the B2B market, particularly in things such as smartphones, and that's actually predominantly down to the volumes available, the B2B market demand is only likely to start picking up as organizations work towards their net zero commitments and circular goals, as you highlighted earlier. So coming on to the bit around regulations and industry standards and targets, well, we've seen, as you rightly say, within the EU, some aspects such as the right to repair coming in for consumer goods and mobile handsets and so on being part of that. But also within the alliance and the industry itself, we've seen GSMA come up with specific targets where there's a requirement of 20% of new mobile devices that are distributed directly through to customers having some form of take-back scheme in place to ensure that all devices are collected, undergo repair, reuse, or transferred to recycling. And that's all by 2030. I'm glad to say BT Group are part of and have committed to take part in this and committed to the 20% target alongside Telefonica, who are also part of the panel today.
Great. Thanks so much, Sawa, for those insights. And it's good to see progress there. And it's interesting that, we always talk about ecosystems, and we're not alone. The telecoms industry does not work in a vacuum. But from what you're saying about B2B customers and enterprises, it takes time to trickle through, I guess. So there's a lot of moving parts in this. Anita, let me come across to you because you're doing sterling work over at the NGMN, and green is one of your key pillars.
Exactly. So green networks is one of our 3 strategic topics in NGMN. And we published already several actionable recommendations when it comes, for instance, to telco supply chain sustainability. And Sava made a very important point that it is important that we work across the value chain. So the value chain needs to deliver value, and there need to be also incentives in place for every player in the value chain, and maybe also for new players when it comes to circular economy, for instance, to deliver value. And it is absolutely correct that we have a lot of different measurements in place, but we do not have harmonized measurements. And for instance, when it comes to providing the end user, being it B2C or B2B, with information how much the service or the device or the infrastructure component is consuming carbon footprints, there are no apple-to-apple comparisons. So there are many different KPIs in place. And I think this is what we also want to achieve by providing the platform for collaboration in NGMN across the entire value chain to collaborate on measures and requirements, and also to share best practices with regards to how can we achieve circular economy in the telco environment. So we are currently working on this topic. We will publish something probably in the second quarter of this calendar year. And this month we are going to publish a document which is analyzing measures how to reduce in general sustainable the impact on the environment. And here we, for instance, go into the topics how to measure, how to do the life cycle assessment. We also look into topics like water footprint. So that's a very important part, not only to use renewable energy, but also when it comes to the production and also to the use of devices to reduce the water footprint and impact. There's also an interesting analysis about the cumulative energy demand of different materials. So gold and copper, for instance, are at the forefront on with regards to such KPIs, with regards to a negative footprint, but because of their specific characteristics, it's probably unlikely that they can be easily replaced. So here, of course, it is about to find measures and processes how to really ensure recycling and reuse of such material, and how to in general reduce the use of rare earths in end user devices, but also in infrastructure components.
Great, thanks so much, Anita, and we look forward to seeing those documents when they are published later this year. And as you say, it's all about the value chain and working across it and measuring and observing and measuring. Well, we've touched on the end user side of this, so let's go into that in a little more detail now. Let's look at recycling and reuse, starting with the end users. What action do you think we can take, such as recycling for customer equipment, smartphones, accessories, SMB equipment? What more can we do as telcos and as a telco industry to help with this? Rebecca, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing as successful, and what can we do?
So we're seeing huge interest in this area from consumers already today, and we need to provide the mechanism that they can actually take part in take back programs, trade in, upgrade, certified pre-owned, and have that available. Our research this past year showed that over 35% of consumers are very interested in purchasing a refurbished or reused device if it's going to be better for the environment. And with those types of statistics, it really encourages us to ensure that these programs are widely available. In 2022 alone, we had received back through the different programs over 22 million devices, a lot of 20s in there. But with that, it just shows, and that's the piece that we've helped facilitate through programs that we have in place. We've really encouraged the flow of devices to come back into that circular economy to be able then to be repurposed and reused to put back in the hands of consumers. And if we think about fundamentally, will that really make a difference or not? If you think of that growing e-waste problem that's out there that you really started us out with thinking on, 12% of that is devices. So if that big of a chunk is devices, then the only way we're going to achieve these objectives is to focus on those devices, the accessories, the items that are in the hands of consumers, and by creating measures where they can bring that back in, and then we can help them in terms of processing those devices and getting them back in the hands of users, keeping that longevity going and going through the environment altogether.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. And Rebecca, can I just come back to you on what you were saying there? Because I'm fascinating. Are consumers interested in the green aspects and furthering sustainability and the green economy, or is price a primary driver for them?
That's a great question. Well, price is always really key, and we have seen with the rising cost of devices that overall it's created more pressure and to create interest in this area. But even if you set price aside or create just a focus on the environmental side, specifically to the point of wanting to reduce the environmental impact through their device use, that was one of those drivers that they shared back in our research. So we even saw a willingness and an interest of some consumers to pay a higher premium for other services if they were also contributing to the environment unrelated to devices. But definitely prices created this pressure overall, and we've seen that since the pandemic with rising costs, that consumers are more interested in exploring other options. But when it comes to sustainability, where we're seeing, and it's probably is no surprise, but we're seeing with the younger demographic, this being even of higher interest and higher concern with that overall average. So we can't forget price, but this was definitely really voted back on making a more greener and sustainable Earth.
That's very interesting. Thanks very much for those insights, Rebecca. Well, let's move on from the consumer market and let's look at the telcos themselves. Telcos have an awful lot of equipment in their networks. Are there similar recycling and reuse measures that can be taken on networking hardware and infrastructure? Diego, let me come across to you. Are there similar aspects that telcos can do with their own network equipment?
Yes, totally. It's even more important. I mean, the use and reuse activities is even more important for network equipment. We launched more than 1.5 years ago with other telcos a strategic paper when each of operator could put on the table what kind of activities we're using in order to promote the circular economy for our network equipment. I mean, reuse at local level, reuse between countries is key in order to reduce the CapEx avoidance, or in order to reduce the CapEx investment that as telcos we usually do, or we usually need to face. The upgrade network that usually allows to great opportunity in order to enhance these kind of activities. Now we are changing our mindset from linear economy to circular economy. It means that when we upgrade the network, we made the upgrade thinking about, how we using the equipment that we used to dismantle, and not just go to the cell to recycle or just to ensure the value of the cycle. What kind of other uses we be able to do that with this kind of equipment? Focus on maintenance, focus on other kinds of activities. Again, first of all, at a local level. Second one is reusing between other countries. And at the end of the day, reusing with third parties. It means allows to create a network partner ecosystem in order to promote, the reuse when it's not possible in our network. So at the end of the day, it's quite similar to the consumer network for devices.
Great, thanks, Diego. And as you say, it does require a mindset change, and it requires cooperation across the partner ecosystem. Sawa, let's come across to you for your thoughts and observations here.
Yeah, absolutely. Just building on what Diego mentioned around the ecosystem, there's also an aspect of bringing in some experts to help support and BT, we're closing down a lot of our exchanges. We have a recycling program set up within BT itself called the Exchange Clearance Operation Program, and that involves recovering, recycling, and reselling all of the equipment from the old telephone exchanges. And that actually allows us to close down aging inefficient networks and to downsize the number of buildings that we have to do that, which also reduces the overall carbon emissions associated with BT. Now, to do that, we've partnered up with a couple of organizations, N2S and TXO, both leading organizations in recovering and recycling telecoms equipment. And for example, working with the likes of N2S, they leverage new technologies such as bioleaching as a process to get deep into the detail of extracting and recovering precious metals from the networking technology. So that's a great example of expanding the ecosystem to bring in experts such as N2S and TXO. But alongside that, I would call out another really important aspect, which is thinking about avoiding the need for hardware at all. So you may have heard of the concept network as a service and so on. And that means virtualization. So as we move a lot of networking infrastructure towards the cloud, then you get a reduced need for equipment and networking infrastructure like we used to require in the past. And being able to host and virtualize the environment for our telco services on the cloud reduces the overall footprint and also the avoided emissions associated with actually manufacturing those devices in the first place.
Some great insights there. That's fascinating. There's a lot of innovation going on. Some of it by the telcos, but a lot of it by partners, specialist partners who apply this knowledge not just to telcos but to other industries, I guess. And we can leverage that. Comes back to what we said earlier about the value chain and creating wider ecosystems of expertise. Another question for you, and it might be the final question we've got for today, and that is this does cost, and telcos are aware of return on investments. So what does this mean, this circular economy mean for telcos when it comes to ROI and cost? Are they going to have to invest now to achieve gains that might only be realized in the longer term? And if so, how can senior executive board level management be persuaded of the merits of the circular economy? Anita, with your organization, you've got a lot of telcos as your members there. What are your thoughts on how we can persuade the telcos collectively and their management teams to get behind this?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to speak about specific costs or a specific return on investment when it comes to monetary values and facts here. And of course, as an industry alliance, that's not something we are tackling. It would depend on business cases and specific situations. But I think it's for sure, and everyone is already on board with regards to the general objective that there is no way, there is no other way than to go that route. So first of all, because we have only one planet, and yes, it sounds always pathetic, but it is simply the case that we have also a responsibility as human beings and as an industry to take care of such resources, but also because there will be, in my personal opinion, for sure also cost and return on investment benefits, because what we already mentioned in the panel today, consumers and maybe even especially the next generations of consumers, they will put a great deal on such factors like a circular economy, refurbished devices, and in general the greenness of networks, but also investors. So for investors, it is also at the moment quite hard to compare different KPIs when it comes to how green the investments are, but that's already happening, and it will accelerate, of course, in the near future and in future. That investors will put a great deal also on how green companies are and what they are doing in this area of sustainability. Yes, we do have also those topics like greenwashing, but for this, I think it's even more important that we collaborate and that we achieve harmonized regulation a level playing field for all actors in the value chain so that we achieve a comparison of apples with apples when it comes to the greenness of companies and the greenness of networks and devices. So, Guy, I'm probably disappointing you because I cannot provide a very specific answer about a return on investment. But I think it is clear that there will be a return on investment in the long term. And on the contrary, for companies who are not investing in circular economy, sustainability when it comes to supply chain and in general in the greenness of their networks, it will bounce back sooner or later also when it comes to probably even also subscriber levels.
Anita, you never disappoint. Don't you worry about that. Some really important points you made there. The level playing field of comparing like to like, and also the green investment with green bonds, and that's very topical, and we're seeing that this month with a major telco announcing some successes there. Rebecca, this is our final question for this session. So let me come to you with your thoughts.
I wanted to add on to what Anita was sharing about the consumers really caring, because that is where it starts. And with that mindset that's out there, if you hear today, global warming, right? This is why we're here. This is why we're talking about this. How do we ensure that we have a future and a greener environment, a greener earth? And so this thought of circularity, of having devices, having network infrastructure, all of this have an ongoing concern, and reducing waste and keeping that going. It is something that is getting into the minds and hearts of the broader public. And so with that in mind, and knowing that consumers want to do business with brands that are benefiting the environment, then that is something that we can definitely use to go back and really think about influencing the business decisions we make. And then if we want to get to hard numbers, I think it's good to keep in mind those net zero targets that are out there, and we're not going to achieve them without circularity. So having a net zero target by 2050 or sooner in the case of a number of companies, it cannot be achieved when you think of the fact that Scope 3 emissions alone contribute to roughly 70% of those greenhouse gas emissions for telcos. And so doing this without creating a circularity program to consider devices, the movement of equipment throughout the ecosystem will not be possible. So hopefully those are things that we're all taking back and really thinking about as we're setting plans and as we're wanting to influence the decisions that we make.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rebecca. And as you mentioned, Scope 3 there, I mean, that's extremely complicated. It involves lots of components, lots of players in the value chain, and it takes time. It takes a lot of time. It is our last question, so I'm going to come to you in a minute. But Diego, did you want to make any final comments here? Maybe I can pick up on what you said earlier about the need for mindset change and engagement with the ecosystem.
Yeah, totally. I mean, from my point of view, actually, it's important to create a mindset, a change of mindset, despite how we are managing our supply chain network for consumer, for devices, for CPEs, for network. I mean, it's for telcos. It's create more than cost, an opportunity to create new business, an opportunity to enhance our P&L in terms of capital avoidance. I mean, we see a lot of opportunities in order to move into our circular economy and to create a green supply chain network.
Diego, thank you very much indeed. And Sawar, let's come across to you for final comments to close out our session today.
Thanks, Guy. I think just building on what was already discussed in terms of the opportunity, we touched on the consumer side. So just commenting on the business side, these organizations with net zero targets, as rightly pointed out by Rebecca, are very much dependent on Scope 3 emissions reduction, and circularity helps unlock that decarbonization piece for a lot of organizations. So we see them putting pressure on telcos to provide them with more sustainable circular products as a way of reducing their carbon impact on them as they procure network services. Alongside that, what is really interesting is we've seen the introduction of carbon taxes, carbon border taxes. So the EU have the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and we're expecting something similar from the UK as well. Now, at the moment, that's a carbon tax, which is a premium based on the carbon footprint of a particular product imported, and it only impacts high intensity sectors, but we actually see this trickling down into other products and services in the future. So for telco products and services, if we are able to establish a circular economy, we are able to deliver products for our customers with a lower carbon impact, circular in design, then ultimately that will also have a positive impact for our customers from an ROI perspective as well.
Well, that's good information. Thanks for sharing that, Sal. That's very, very useful. Well, we must leave it there. I'm sure we will continue this debate during our live Q&A show later. For now, though, thank you all for taking part in our discussion. And if you're watching this on day 3 of our Green Network Summit, then please do send us your questions and we'll answer as many of them as we can in our final live Q&A show, which is coming up very soon. The full schedule of programmes and speakers can be found on the TelecomTV website, which is where you'll also find the Q&A form and also our poll question. For now, though, thanks for watching and goodbye.